Section 23 of Christmas and Christmas Lore. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Brandon. Christmas and Christmas Lore by Thomas G. Crippen. Section 23. The Praesepio. On Christmas Eve, 1224, a very realistic tableau of the Nativity was arranged by St. Francis in a village church at Greccio in Italy. Joseph and Mary, represented by real persons, watched beside a manger in which a figure of the Holy Child lay upon straw, while a real ox and ass were tethered close by. Mass was celebrated, and Francis preached on the topic of the season. This was the origin of the simple object lesson called the Praesepio, or Praesepe, or popularly the Christmas crib, which with innumerable variations has been reproduced at Christmas in almost every Roman Catholic church in Christendom, and has found its way with divers adaptations far beyond the limits of the Church of Rome, as for example in the celebrated Moravian school of Neuwied. A visitor to Rome in the early part of the 19th century describes the Praesepio in the church of the Araceli as best worth seeing. Daylight was completely excluded, and the artificial light was so managed as to stream in fluctuating rays from intervening silvery clouds, and shed a radiance over the child and his mother, who in a graceful attitude holds up the drapery which half conceals the sleeping infant. His swaddling clothes are richly embroidered, and both he and his mother are adorned with jewels lent for the purpose by princesses and other ladies of high rank. Groups of cattle grazing, peasantry engaged in different occupations, and other objects enliven the picturesque scenery, and every living creature in the group with eyes directed to the Praesepio falls prostrate in adoration. During the visit thus described, a little girl of 6 or 8 years old stood on a bench and recited a suitable discourse, with all the gesticulations of a little actress, perhaps in complete commemoration of those words of the psalmist, quoted by our blessed Lord: "Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings Thou hast perfected praise." In southern Italy, the praesep is a domestic as well as a church custom. The manger is constructed and adorned a week beforehand, and is often a genuine work of art. C. A. Miles, in Christmas in Ritual and Tradition, reproduces a photograph of a magnificent Neapolitan praesep, which represents the Holy Family in a shed formed amidst the ruins of a Corinthian temple. On each side the shepherds approach with their offerings. One leads a lamb, another is attended by a dog. Others have brought gifts in baskets. 4 or 5 baby angels are fluttering above. The ox and ass do not appear in the shed, but below is a cave, near the entrance of which oxen are standing or lying. Shepherds are negotiating with a doorkeeper for the admission of a few sheep into the cave, while a number of goats are left outside. The whole is built up in one corner of a lofty hall, of which it almost reaches the ceiling. The domestic praesep is often the work of the children, and in Rome an enormous bazaar, as well as numerous shops, supply materials for its construction. There are earthenware figures varying in price from a halfpenny to many shillings, cork to represent rockwork, moss and liverwort, and scenery roughly painted in watercolors. For the construction frequently includes not only the stable or cave and its occupants, but the surroundings of Bethlehem, imagined in complete ignorance of geography and history. An orgiastic medley of chaos and luxuriant riches, a radical negation of all the notions of time and space. This is what the bold Roman boy gathers around the crib, in which, after all, they sometimes forget to place the bambino. From the first setting up of the Praesept till Christmas Eve, visits are exchanged, and mutual criticisms are passed on the domestic preparations. Minstrels come round with bagpipes and carols, and sing or recite prayers before every precept, whether in house or church. Then on Christmas morning the bambino is placed in the manger, with solemn ceremonies, and feasting begins in earnest. In Bohemia the Praesepio, or as it is there called, the Bethlehem, is a permanent memorial, arranged on a tiny stage, and often handed down from generation to generation, and great care is expended in carving, painting, and dressing the figures, and keeping them in repair. In some parts of France, and perhaps in other countries, the Praesepio serves, as it were, to visualize the belief, already mentioned, as a mystical repetition of the Incarnation at Christmas. This is thought of in relation to the midnight Mass, at which solemnity people gather from outlying hamlets, literally to visit the Holy Child. Sometimes great store of provision is brought, nominally as gifts to Joseph and Mary, really for a picnic after Mass, at which the participants are guests of the Holy Family. This custom gave birth to a class of curious carols, abounding with local allusions both to persons and places, sometimes complimentary, sometimes sarcastic. No such carols exist in English, for there can be little doubt that the interesting group of carols in many languages, which have the form of a cradle song sung by the Blessed Virgin to the Holy Child, were originally associated with the Praesepio. End of section 23. Recording by John Brandon.